Okay, we will begin. Welcome, everyone. This is the last lunch talk of the fall semester. And we're really pleased to have Stephen Booth here with us today, who will share his work, close out our semester with Public Humanities Now, New Voices, New Directions, the speaker series. I'd like to start by acknowledging that the Public Humanities Center and Brown University are located on the traditional homelands of the Narragansett and Wampanoag peoples, who have lived on this land for thousands of years and continued to steward it. We note too that our campus drew its early life's blood from the African slave trade in the Americas, and there are buildings here constructed by enslaved people. These acknowledgements commit us as a community to a lifetime of anti-racist work. Okay, welcome everyone. I'm Marissa Brown. I'm the Assistant Director for Programs at the John Nicholas Brown Center for Public Humanities and Cultural Heritage. And I have the pleasure of introducing Stephen Booth today. Stephen's talk is titled Lost Capture, the State of Black Cultural Archives in and Beyond Chicago. Stephen is an archivist, a researcher, and co-founder of the Blackivists. His research interests include born digital audiovisual materials, Black cultural heritage preservation, community archives, and digital scholarship. He's worked for the National Archives and Records Administration since 2009, and currently manages the audiovisual collection for the Barack Obama Presidential Library. He previously held positions at Boston University's Howard Gottlieb Archival Research Center and JP Morgan & Chase, cataloging the papers of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He's actively involved in the Society of American Archivists and has served on the governing board of that organization. He's given talks at the Library of Congress, Bentley Historical Library, and today at our center. From 2019 to 2020, Stephen worked alongside Stacie Williams as guest co-editor of Lost Capture, an editorial project exploring the state of Black cultural archives in and beyond Chicago. The project was presented by 60 Inches from Center, a Chicago-based arts publication and archiving initiative. He's currently working on a book project with Barry Brown at the Schomburg Center for Research on Black Culture, documenting the contributions and impact of African-American archivists in the Society of American Archivists, which he was just telling me a little bit about before everyone joined us. And sounds like a fascinating project. And I think everyone on will look forward to publication date when that comes, Stephen, in a couple of years maybe. He has a BA from Morehouse and an MS in library science from Simmons College. And we are just so pleased to have you here today and share your work. For everyone who's been here before, you know that Stephen's presentation will be about half an hour or so. And if you have a question or a comment, just send me a note in the chat box, letting me, you don't have to tell me what it is, just let me know you have one. And then I can sort of let you know which number in the queue you are. And when you're up, I can unmute you so we can have a questions and conversation following Stephen's talk. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Everyone bear with me. Okay, can you all see that okay? All right, perfect. So hello and good afternoon. I'm Stephen Booth, and it's a pleasure to be here with you all today. And I want to thank the Brown Center for Public Humanities for the invitation to participate in this year's fall lecture series, with special thanks to Marissa Brown and Sabina Griffin for all of their assistance and support in preparing for this event. Today, I'm just going to talk about Lost Capture, which is a digital editorial project presented by 60 Inches from Center, and just kind of walk you through our process from conception to completion and highlight some of the pieces that are a part of this endeavor. So to start off, let's see, I'll just tell you a little bit about 60 Inches from Center. So they were founded in 2010, and they are an arts a Chicago-based online arts publication and archiving initiative that's focused on preserving the legacies and telling the stories of artists who are often neglected within mainstream art, historical narratives, and repositories. Led by curator, writer, and co-founder Tempest Hazel, 60 actively advocates for artists' legacy building through arts journalism, storytelling, and ephemera cataloging. As an arts publication, 60 provides news and content about upcoming arts events in Chicago, as well as in the Midwest. And they also feature video, audio, photography, editorial essays, exhibition reviews, and interviews as a way to not only share what's happening in the local scene, but to also document artists and arts events that exist outside of the city's mainstream cultural institutions. And they do this with a particular focus on prioritizing and promoting artists, writers, and cultural workers across the spectrum of gender, race, ability, and discipline. Since 60's launch, they have maintained an ongoing partnership with the Harold Washington Library to increase awareness, content, and accessibility to the Chicago Artist Files that are housed at the main branch of the Chicago Public Library. This collection was originally established in the 1940s and contained materials more so about established mid to late 20th century artists. The partnership with 60 has improved the collection, and it now contains information about and materials from 21st century artists and their artistic practices with new media and digital technology. 60 regularly contributes content from their website to the archive, creating files for each artist that's featured and interviewed. And once a file has been created, artists are encouraged to add more materials to it. This initiative has aided in the preservation of Chicago art history, addressed the changing landscape of the art community, and most importantly, helped document the work of artists who are of color, women, LGBTQ+, and individuals with disabilities. At the beginning of their partnership, the Chicago Artist Files represented roughly 9,600 individuals. That number has since grown to over 11,000 artists, and it also includes art movements and arts organizations. 60 has also sponsored a number of programmatic events and collaborative projects over the years, including the Get Archived series, which was co-produced with Chicago Public Media, as well as the Chicago Artists and Archives Festival, which focuses on legacy preservation and DIY archiving for artists across disciplines. These multi-day summer festivals have featured workshops, performances, film screenings, installations, 101 archiving guidance, and opportunities for artists to be introduced to archives and special collections from across the city. For the last iteration of the festival, 3 Chicago artists created original artworks in response to archival collections housed at the Chicago History Museum, the Harold Washington Library, and the Read Write Library. The community reaction and success of this project inspired 60 to continue this initiative as the Chicago Artists and Archives Project. With funding from the Gaylord and Dorothy Donnelly Foundation, 3 more Chicago-based writers and artists commissioned new works based on archival collections at Media Burn, the Leather Archives and Museum, and the Newberry Library's Chicago Protest Collection. These vital collaborations and contributions have helped artists explore the role of the archive in preserving and interpreting the stories of Chicago, as well as the ways in which archives can be a resource for creative communities. 60 not only recognizes the archives as a physical space, but also amplifies the work and labor of archivists and memory workers. In the fall of 2018, they published a series of articles that illuminated the work and lives of several local Black archivists. This was done in part of Envisioning Justice, a 19-month initiative that was presented by Illinois Humanities that looked into how Chicagoans and Chicago artists respond to the impact of incarceration in local communities and how the arts and humanities are used to devise strategies for lessening this impact. The interviews introduce readers to the professionals who are in the stacks processing collections, as well as highlighted the diversity that exists in the archives profession, and also addressed some radical practices in archives related to social justice and liberatory work. With this context in mind, it is no surprise why a project like Lost Capture would be created by 60. And so now I'd like to share with you the genesis of the project and our efforts to bring it to fruition. So for those who are not aware, Chicago is home to some of the longest running Black publications, one of the first African-American museums, and ceiling-shattering activists, artists, entrepreneurs, organizers, and scholars. And having such a rich history means Chicago is also home to incomparable archives that capture the quiet, monumental, and iconic people and movements that fuel this history. While the value of these histories is undeniable, over the past decade, many of Chicago's Black collections have become at risk of being lost, whether it's collections being acquired and relocated to other cities, institutional collections lacking caretaking resources and remaining inaccessible, even materials being at constant risk of deterioration, or communities lacking access to this kind of information that would help them organize their own materials. In a lot of ways, Chicago is experiencing an erasure of African-American history, which is exacerbated by a mass exodus of Black populations from the city. And this was really heightened in 2019 with the closure of the Center for Black Music Research and the sale of the Johnson Publishing Company photo archive to various nonprofit and philanthropic organizations. Tempest and Nora Schwaff, who is senior editor at 60, had a conversation about what was happening to these and other Black archives in the city and came up with the idea for 60 to explore this topic, given their unique position as a platform known for raising issues and concerns and their work with archives and archivists over the years. So Tempest and Nora approached myself and Stacie Williams, who is at the University of Chicago Library and also a co-founder of the Blackivists. And they invited us to be a part of the project as guest co-editors. On a cold Chicago night in October 2019, while enjoying calzones and wine in the Little Italy neighborhood, we had the first of many conversations, and we talked and really talked about the sale of the Johnson photo collection and Black collections in general, but also about Black memory workers, curators, and archivists who care for them in libraries, museums, and archives, and how they are often overlooked. Tempest and Nora were quite persuasive and adamant about Stacie and I leading this project, given our experiences as Black archivists who have worked in a variety of archives, as Black archivists who have roots in Chicago, as Black archivists who understood and understand the severity of what was happening to Black cultural heritage materials and who could bring that to light to a wider audience. And in this initial conversation, it sparked the theme of lost capture, which I explained a little earlier. And while there were materials that we were physically losing to relocation, deterioration, or a lack of documentation, we also recognized that there were significant collections and materials and also organizations related to the Black experience here in the city that live and reside here and that are valuable and really needed to be amplified, such as the Vivian G. Harsh collection, which is a part of the Chicago Public Library. At this meeting, we also agreed that we wanted the project to be a multimedia composition of interviews, essays, photography, and illustrations, as well as video from a range of contributors in Chicago and outside of the state of Illinois, who hold experience and expertise in Black collections, as well as researchers who utilize Black archives in their creative and artistic practices, and even within academia. So we really wanted to cast a wide net of experience, people who interact with these collections. So with all of this in mind, we came up with a plan of action. We went ahead and scheduled regular check-in meetings, kind of identified and contacted potential contributors and set a tentative release date. In addition to this, we also set a budget. 60 is a 501c3 organization with an operating budget that supports their programs and initiatives, and they compensate their team and contributors for their work and time. So with the release date set for March 2020, we quickly got to work. And given our somewhat tight turnaround, we felt it would be best to do targeted asks to individuals in our networks rather than put out a call for submission. So, but also leaving that as a backup plan in case no one was interested. Luckily, many of the individuals we approached were interested and agreed to contribute to the project. And because we were familiar with their work, a part of our targeted approach was also inquiring if they would be willing to discuss certain topics. So for example, our friend and colleague, Christina Shutt, is the director of the Mosaic Templars Cultural Center in Little Rock, which is the only Black museum in the state of Arkansas. So we were really interested in hearing her perspective on running a Black museum and what it takes to do that. We were also open to other ways that contributors thought would be best to share their perspective, whether that was through an essay, an interview, or another form of creative work. And we also gave them the option to explore other topics as well. So because there was so much we wanted to explore in loss capture, especially as it related to Black collections and archives, and we didn't want to limit ourselves in scope, we felt it was best to consider other ways to engage with the public about the project beyond 60's website. So we brainstormed the possibility of having an event series that could be supported with funding from organizations like Illinois Humanities and even the Society of American Archivists Foundation. And as I previously mentioned, 60 has worked with Illinois Humanities before, and Stacie and I have held numerous leadership roles within SAA. So given our distinct relationships with these entities, we felt it was best to reach out to those organizations first to see if they would support the project. So with it being close to the holidays in 2019, we recognized that there wasn't much work we could truly tackle outside of just talking with contributors. So the plan was to really hit the ground running in January of 2020, and that we did until the pandemic happened here in the US. And so given the uncertainty of the situation, the changing landscape of how we were working and living, we put a pause on a project. And I have to give much credit to Tempest for allowing us breathing room to figure out our personal situations, and also for her giving us ample space and time to adjust to what we were individually and collectively experiencing, which in a lot of ways resonated with our theme of loss capture. In addition, during this time, we also checked in with our contributors to let them know that the project was on hold and that we would be in touch with them at a later date. At this point, we had only completed one interview, but because we were still generating ideas, we decided to actually push the release date back to the summer prior to the start of the pandemic. So in early summer 2020, we were notified that we had received a grant from the Society of American Archivists Foundation. And although we were still adjusting to our new normal, I think this news really gave us the strength and the courage to pick the project back up. But because so much had happened, COVID-19 pandemic, the protests in response to state-sanctioned violence and racial injustice, we felt it was necessary to incorporate them into the project and also give the contributors an opportunity to address them as well if they felt led to do so. So we came together virtually and had what Stacie called a design intervention. The funding from SAA allowed us to pay the contributors a higher wage for their pieces as well as their time. And the precariousness of the archives profession has really been brought to light due to the pandemic, and as well as in other industries and fields too. And so we wanted to do our part to support our contributors by paying them more than what we initially said we would be able to. We also discussed the timeline, what was done, what needed to be done, how long it would take to complete. And so here is just a view of our working timeline. And as you can see, the strike throughs and just the revisions that we made to the timeline during this design intervention that we had. And so in thinking about, I think this meeting we had was at the end of June. So October is Archives Month, and we felt between June and October, we could really get the work done that we needed to for the project. And with October being Archives Month, we just felt that that was a perfect fit for the release too. Um, so we discussed our original plans and adjusted them according to our individual capacity and what we could feasibly accomplish considering the circumstances of life and the world at that time. So with the new plan of action, we hit the ground running again. Collectively, we researched web design templates, purchased the domain name, created social media handles, commissioned an illustrator to create original artwork. Stacie and I researched archival images and footage to accompany the pieces. We kind of reimagined the event series in a virtual setting, edited the interviews and essays, worked with 60's wonderful team of copy editors, wrote the letter from the editors, scheduled the discussion series, which all led to the website launch on October 15th of 2020, during both Mercury and Mars retrograde. We were really bold to do that. And so now I'd just like to walk you through a little bit of the website and just share with you a little bit about some of the pieces. And so this is the homepage, and as you scroll, you get these fantastic illustrations that were done by our illustrator Kiki. I'm sorry, I was blanking on her name. And what Kiki did was really, she read the pieces and conceptualized what it would look like artistically to convey what the contributors were discussing, whether in their interview or in their essay. And so, yeah, these are just some really, I think, attention grabbing and dynamic illustrations for the project. And in our table of contents, let's see. So More Than a Melody, Reimagining the Sounds of Blackness is an essay by Archivist Bennett, who is a multimedia artist here in Chicago. And Archivist discusses their experience doing research at the Center for Black Music Research here in Chicago, and their reaction to the news of its closure and what's being lost in terms of not being able to access the collection, how we once were back when it was a fully functioning operating center with a dedicated staff and team of information professionals. Another great piece that I would like to highlight is Don't It Always Seem to Go, which is written by Tempest Hazel. And in a lot of ways, this is like our genealogy piece. Tempest takes us through a conversation she had with her mother in Peoria about some property that their family used to own, but it's no longer in the family. And Tempest walks us through also kind of like this timeline of early Black collectors. So Arturo Schomburg and Dorothy Wesley Porter, and also Vivian Harsh, who was responsible for creating the Special Negro Collection here in Chicago in the 40s and 50s, but who is not as known for her contributions as someone like Schomburg and Porter. In addition, Tempest provides us with a wonderful timeline. Here it is, yeah. A wonderful timeline that really goes through all of the Black collections that are here and remain here, but also some of the collections that we have unfortunately lost. And this is not an exhaustive timeline, it's not meant to be, but it is a wonderful, I think it's wonderful insight into what currently exists and some things that no longer are accessible to us for a variety of reasons. Another piece I would like to point out is Love Through Loss, which is a series of interviews conducted by Erin Glasgow. And originally, Stacie and I approached Erin about writing an essay about her work with No Cop Academy, which is an initiative to stop the building of a $95 million police academy on the west side of Chicago. Erin agreed to be a part of the project, but she approached us with a wonderful idea of, instead of her writing about her experience, what would it look like to amplify the work of youth organizers who are really on the ground doing the work. And so we have a wonderful interview with Nita Tennyson, as well as Asha Edwards, who talk about memorializing Black loss, as well as amplifying and supporting Black livelihood. And so the images that accompany this piece are really captivating, because a lot of the things that they discuss in their interview, you can really see it in the photographs, which are honestly from the late 60s, early 70s. And so it's interesting how, as time changed, some of the experiences and issues that we're dealing with doesn't. And so I would highly encourage you all to interact with that. Back Down Memory Lane is a conversation with Arlene Turner Crawford, who is an elder artist here in Chicago. And Arlene provides us with this wonderful landscape of Black cultural heritage organizations that were thriving and during the 1970s, but unfortunately no longer exist now. And here are just a image of a few of Afrocobra, and a postcard. Let's see. And so, in thinking about the virtual series, the discussion series, we of course decided to do them virtually, and in thinking about also as a way to broaden our reach. And so for our one conversation I was really excited about is with Dr. Melanie Chambliss and Tracy Drake about the life and legacy of Vivian Harsh. And they do a fantastic job of really walking us through who Vivian Harsh was and her contributions to collecting materials about the Black experience, but also the ways in which she hid herself personally from the historical record. And so only her contributions are known, but not her personal life. And so it's a fantastic, really fantastic conversation about someone who is well known in Chicago, but not outside of Chicago. And so I'm hopeful that with this conversation, Vivian Harsh's profile will be raised. In addition, we also decided to create some playlists. Chicago is home to a number of music genres, particularly gospel, as well as house music. And so we just created, right now there are 2 playlists. At some point we are gonna create some more to really just kind of capture the sounds of like Black archives and Black cultural material here in the city. And oh, one more thing that I would like to point out. Yeah. And so I talked about how this project was really inspired by the sale of the Johnson Publishing Company photo archive. And so one thing we also decided to do was to crowdsource people's memories about their interaction with Ebony Magazine, Jet Magazine, and other publications of Johnson. And so if you or someone you know has a memory that you would like to share, please come to the website and submit your memories with us. At some point after we've collected some, we're gonna post them here on the website as well. And we were able to find some really awesome images from a few archives across the country that were in the public domain to also share on the site, which I think are pretty cool, especially these images of models from the Ebony Fashion Fair. And so in thinking about the release of the project, we've had a really positive feedback from people and organizations and institutions. Matter of fact, one organization in particular here in the city looked at their own collections and what they had related to the Black experience. And they've kind of created their own, I won't say timeline, but a database, if you will, of those materials in order to make them well known to their user communities. We've heard really great feedback from elders in the archives profession, a lot of our colleagues. It seems to be really well received. And so we're really grateful for all the love and attention. And like we stated in the letter from the editors, it really is a labor of love. And, I think I can speak for Stacie too when I say that it's nice to be in a position where we can truly amplify the work that Black memory workers and archivists do day in and day out and share that with the public. And so, in thinking about the process for this project, it was really, really iterative. Things were changing up until the last minute, but that made it fun and in a lot of ways exciting. Tempest and Nora were fantastic with, allowing us free reign to really think differently about how to engage with the community as it relates to this topic. And so, matter of fact, I think the idea for the playlist, um, we had talked about it, but I don't think we really had decided that we were going to do it. And then one day I was like, oh, don't forget about the playlist. And so Stacie and I put that together like in a couple of days or whatever. So it really was an iterative process that just kind of flowed. And I'm really grateful to Tempest and Nora for that. They made us really feel at home and comfortable. In a lot of ways, this is a form of scholarship outside of the academy. And so I think, especially in our doing this in our personal capacities. And so we have received word that a library and science program here in the Midwest will incorporate this into their curriculum. So it's nice to know that it will be utilized in the academy by future archivists and library workers. And so, I think I am over time. So I'll just quickly wrap up. So what's next? We are thinking about some other iterations of the project. Uh, while there were a lot of things we covered, there were a lot of things that got left out. And so we're thinking, what could volume 2 look like? And we also recognize that the need to explore archives as it relates to Indigenous communities and Latinx communities. And so there is also the possibility of doing that as well. And before I close, considering I'm talking in New England today, not the Midwest, excuse me, I would just like to dedicate this presentation to Miss Charlotte Price, who was a longtime archivist in New England. And she actually started her library career in her mid-50s, and she worked with Dorothy Porter at the Moreland Spin Garn, and also was responsible for starting a number of archives on Cape Cod. And so I was introduced to Mrs. Price's work by a colleague, Michelle Gachette, a number of years ago. And so I just want to dedicate this presentation to her memory and to her legacy. And with that, we can open it up for discussion, questions, and answers. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you so much. That was so inspiring on so many levels. And, I think I'm an architectural historian, so I kind of come at this slightly differently, but with the same kind of feeling, obviously, that, this problem of gaps in archives. And then, of course, in architectural, the city that we walk through or the places that we know, the fact that there's so much that is hidden, that's the stories that are not told, both in our buildings and our archives. And this is a really, really important project in correcting that. And also just the way that you've gone about it, the partnerships that you were able to put together, and the dynamism of what you produced just feels like itself a really big model, I'm sure, for future projects. So I'm sure more and more people are going to be incorporating this and learning a lot from what you guys have been able to do, especially during COVID.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for the work. Ray has the first question, and let me just help you so that you can be unmuted. There you go.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Stephen. I have so much to say. I think it would just talk to each other. It was actually my intention to introduce you today, but I have the EMEA conference going on this week, so it was a lot.
Yeah,
So
I get it.
I'm the fellow there, and so my mentor is Candace Ming.
Yes,
Yes,
yes, I love Candace.
she told me to tell you hi, and she was like, "I'm up a meeting with you and Stephen," and I was like, "Well, you'll be at my school, so I'll introduce myself." Uh, yeah, we're overlapping on a lot of levels. And you just gave me so much with this Chicago. I started school studying film at Columbia College, actually. So
Okay.
when you were talking about it, I was like, the Center for Black Music Research. I was like, is it still there? And you were like, no. You're very unfortunate. Um, yeah, I don't really have a question per se. This was all really wonderful, and I need to like dive deeper into these people that you mentioned. But Candace did tell me to ask you sort of about the Blackivists and about sort of how small the Black archiving community is. I know you mentioned like making partnerships with the only Black museum in Arkansas, which is just insane to think about. So yeah, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure, yeah. So I'll start with the Black archivist demographic. So we are a small number of individuals. And I will say, it's interesting to see the shift happening. So I've been a professional archivist for about 13 years now. And I remember when I started going to professional association meetings like Society of American Archivists, being maybe like the youngest person there, but there were a number of Black elders who had pretty much like paved the way. And so in talking to them, I kind of learned about the history of Black archivists, like, people that were actually trained in this work, and how when they started out in the 80s, it was just maybe 5 of them that would like come to the conference. And it might have been just a few more across the country. And so my first SAA conference was 2008, San Francisco. I was the youngest person there. And by 2012, 2013, the number had increased. So there was um, more Black archivists coming from Simmons College. And a lot of that had to do with Dr. Tawana Worley, who was the first archival, African-American archival educator. And she had started this recruitment program to really create a pipeline from HBCUs to Simmons College. And so a number of us came out of Simmons, myself, Amber Moore, who's at the Schlesinger at Harvard, Holly Smith, who's at Spelman, Derek Mosley, who is my Morehouse brother, and I actually recruited Derek into the profession, Miranda Rivers, Stacie Williams, Christina Shutt, Tanya Doherty. So a bunch of us came out of Simmons, and then there were these recruitment fellowship programs that were kind of popping up. And so then we had people entering the profession like Skylar Hearn and Raquel Flores Clemens and Tracy Drake and Aisha Johnson Jones, Aisha Hakel, a bunch of people. So now it's interesting to go to conferences and you see about 20 to 30 Black archivists. And that number didn't exist just a decade ago. So it's absolutely fantastic. We are our own community. You know, we all know each other, even if we don't know each other personally, right? There is some type of connection. And then to get introduced to people like Candace, right? Who I met through a colleague that worked at Smithsonian. And I think Candace was living in New York at the time and had come down to DC, and we just connected. And so, we, in a lot of ways, we kind of find each other, whether, especially with like social media. I think that has been a great resource for us in terms of connecting with one another.
Absolutely.
In terms of the Blackivists, so the Blackivists is a collective of trained Black archivists, Chicago-based, and we kind of work with local organizations, individuals, and groups to assist them in preserving their materials. And so we practice a people first approach. A lot of those connections are made, a lot of the connections that we have with these organizations are made through our own personal connections with people who might be a part of that organization or know of someone who's active. And, our approach is very much so, how can we help you do what you're trying to do? We are not a collecting institution. And we also don't do this on behalf of our respective institutions. So it is an outside thing that we do outside of our 9-to-5s. And we've been really fortunate to work with some fantastic groups, Honey Pop Performance on their project to document Chicago house music, as well as the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party, their work with capturing oral histories, the Chicago Torture Justice Memorial Committee, and I feel like I'm forgetting someone. But yeah, that's been great. It's been really fulfilling. And I think for us who are part of the Blackivists, it's nice to be able to contribute our skill sets and our expertise to the communities that we not only live in, but that we're a part of. And that just feels like different work from doing institutional work. And yeah, yes, so I'll end there. I hope I answered your question, Ray.
You did. Can I ask another question? Am I allowed? So speaking of social media, the Blackivists already follow me on Twitter, but I just went through and liked a bunch of your tweets. So you can follow me on Twitter. I am trying to come back to Chicago, probably through the Center for Home Movies.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah. But I gotta get back to Chicago. I'm pretty sure I saw people I knew in your slides. But so I wanted to ask actually what you were just saying, the importance of like working outside of the institution, outside of the academy, and then sort of bringing that work back in. And then I'll shut up.
Yeah. I think that's what's so fun about being a part of the Blackivists. Like we're actually in a position where we can kind of, where we can practice some of these theories that are being written about in archival scholarship. And for example, Radical Empathy, which is a Radical Empathy in Archives, which was a piece written by Michelle Caswell and Marika Seafor, which talks about the connection we have as archivists to users, to communities, to the materials that we work with, as well as to each other. And so it's nice to be in a situation where we can really practice that and see what it's like, and without there being any pressure not to do that type of stuff. And then I think in a lot of ways we try to bring it back into our institutions, but in a lot of ways, being outside of an institution, I just honestly think it gives us more room to play and research and just explore. And I think that's really exciting and fulfilling.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Another question about this project in particular I had was, what's the long-term plan for this site? Is the intention to kind of continue to add to the content, or is it sort of, are you completely finished with it and will it just stay as is? Or was there ever a print publication imagined for this? And then how you're thinking about how people are going to discover it?
Yeah, those are all great questions. So originally the idea was that lost capture would just be one thing and done. And we were actually fortunate to kind of preview our work with the Archivists and Archives of Color section, which is a part of SAA, during their annual meeting. And out of that conversation, someone suggested, how about you all do this, expand this out and think about it regionally, right? And so that started some conversations about what it would look like to do other iterations. So right now, the site as it is, we actually do have the domain. So at some point we can switch to that. And I would imagine that on that site could be all the volumes listed and you just click and kind of just go through. We have discussed the possibility of a print publication, but we haven't talked about necessarily like what that looks like in great detail. But yeah, what's awesome is that 60 has a dynamic communications and marketing team. And so we're constantly like rethinking ways to like push out this same content to different audiences. And so we have an Instagram account, which isn't fully populated yet, but that's, you know, intentional because we want to like still make this fresh and new for people that will engage with it for the first time. And so as of right now, this will be it. But I think we're going to regroup maybe in the new year, think about some other stuff. And I would imagine that the next iteration will probably be led by a different group of people, which I think is exciting and will provide fresh perspective, new eyes, new ideas, and new thoughts. And so I'm excited. And a lot of this work was also, especially in terms of like the site design, was inspired by the Willie Smith Community Archive that was done in New York, which is also a dynamic website. And so we just, you know, really tried to see what was out there and how we could like take that and rework it and redesign it to fit our needs. But as of right now, the site will remain as it is, and we'll just come up with some new ways to engage with different audiences. I know one thing that we are really committed to doing is continuing to have conversations. So on the side is a conversation between Irisha and Arlene, this wonderful intergenerational conversation about music here in the city. And so because there are so many areas that we didn't cover, I think the conversation series will be that much more useful. So like dance and architecture and a host of other, you know, topics that we didn't get a chance to have written pieces about. So I think we're going to really lean into the discussion series as a way to continue to populate content too.
Yeah, what I love about this project too is that, as you said, kind of the focus on Black memory workers, curators, and archivists. So the people who do the work in addition to the kind of, you know, the objects and the things themselves is great. And so for this, so the 60 inches from center really maintain the website?
Yes.
Yeah, got it. Okay. Other questions, folks, before I know people need to go in a few minutes because some classes will be starting and people have to be elsewhere on Zoom for classes. But we probably have time for one more if anyone else has some questions or comments to share. All right, I think we're good. Ray, did you have a third that you were just wanting to ask, that you were too embarrassed to ask a third? Because you can do it. All good. Okay. Well, this was great. I know there's a bunch of people who couldn't come who are really happy that we taped it. Yeah, I think for the work in the public humanities that this community does, this project is, I think, just my guess is for a lot of people, some of the things they themselves are working on right now, it's really a direct kind of inspiration and potentially model for thinking about how you do collaborative digital humanities projects that you know, I mean, you're doing so many different things at once with this project, and it looks great too. So
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, if there's not one last, then we just, you know, we as a community love to thank you, and we could use our clap buttons. And yeah, wish you well with the next, you know, kind of continued work on this and next projects. And we look forward to hearing back from you maybe in a couple of years or so on where those all are. And good luck with the book.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you all. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.